The silence was the most expensive thing in their modern glass and steel mansion. It was a silence bought with billions, furnished with art from every continent, and padded with carpets so plush you felt as though you were walking on air. Yet, for Amelia Thorne, a silence so profound was a constant gnawing presence. It had been 9 months, 27 days, and a countless number of hours since she had last felt her husband's warmth, his touch, or a shared, knowing glance across a room. Liam Thorne, the 35-year-old tech titan who had built an empire from a single, brilliant algorithm, was a ghost in his own home. He moved through the gilded halls with an air of preoccupied urgency, his face illuminated by the perpetual glow of a smartphone screen. His voice, when he spoke at all, was a series of clipped commands to his unseen assistants, or responses to Amelia's timid questions. "I am working," he would say. "Do not worry." She did worry. Every day was a fresh canvas of worry. The first month, she had attributed his distance to a new project. His company, Thorntech, was in the final stages of a major acquisition, and the stress was immense. She was a patient and understanding wife. She would cook his favorite meals, place a glass of his preferred vintage by his side as he worked, and wait. But the weeks turned into months. Her quiet offerings of support were met with absent smiles, and her gentle attempts to hold his hand were met with a quick, nervous withdrawal. The excuses began to feel like a script. He was too tired. He had a headache. He had a meeting in the morning. She felt her own presence in the house shrank, as if she were a character in a play whose lines were being cut one by one. She began to wonder if there was another woman. The thought was a sharp, persistent pain, but a private investigator she discreetly hired could find nothing. Liam's life outside the office was a blank slate. He went from Thorntech to home and back again. There were no secret dinners, no late-night calls to unfamiliar numbers. He was only married to his work, but why was that so? Amelia began to fill her days. She had a successful career as an architect, but her projects felt meaningless in the face of her crumbling marriage. She volunteered at a local animal shelter, joined a book club, and took up painting. The canvases were a riot of color, a stark contrast to the monochrome gray she felt her life had become. Her friends, seeing her hollowed eyes and forced smiles, offered platitudes and advice. "Give him space," they said. "Men are like that when they are stressed." But it was more than stress. It was a complete and utter disconnect. She felt as though she lived with a stranger, a brilliant, wealthy stranger who had forgotten her name. The silence was not empty. It was filled with her unspoken questions. Was she no longer attractive to him? Had she done something wrong? Was there a flaw in her that she could not see? The mansion felt less like a home and more like a mausoleum for a love that had died a slow, quiet death. The anniversary dinner, their 4th wedding anniversary, arrived like a small, sad ghost. Amelia had not expected much, but she had hoped for a break in the pattern. She booked a table at their favorite restaurant, a place where they had celebrated their engagement, their birthdays, and 1,000 small, happy moments. She bought a simple, elegant black dress. She had her hair styled. She was determined to be a woman who was worth fighting for, a woman her husband might remember. Liam arrived home exactly 5 minutes before they were due to leave. He was still in his bespoke suit, his tie slightly askew. He glanced at her, a fleeting moment of recognition in his eyes, before his gaze returned to his phone. "Ready?" he asked, his voice flat. The dinner was a disaster. The conversation was a one-sided affair, with Amelia trying to discuss her work, her painting, the upcoming charity event she was organizing. Liam offered vague hums of acknowledgement, his thumb a constant blur against the screen. The champagne, which was meant to be a toast to their shared past and hopeful future, remained untouched in its bucket. Finally, Amelia could not take it anymore. She placed her fork down with a gentle but deliberate clatter. "Liam," she said, her voice soft but firm, "can we please talk? Just for 1 minute." Without the phone, he looked up, a flicker of irritation in his eyes. He set the phone face down on the table, a symbolic gesture that did not feel genuine. "What is it, Amelia?" he asked, the phrase sounding more like a sigh than a question. Tears welled in her eyes. The frustration of 9 months boiled over. "What is this? Liam, what is happening to us? We have not been intimate in 9 months. You barely look at me. You do not talk to me. Are we still married?" His expression did not change. He was a master of emotional control, but in that moment she saw the cracks. A muscle in his jaw clenched. He looked at the half-empty water glass, at the flickering candle, at anything. "Is there someone else?" "We are married," she asked. Amelia. A question, a raw, vulnerable plea. He shook his head without looking up. "There is not." "Then what is it? I have a right to know." I have tried to be patient. I have tried to understand. But I am dying here, Liam. I am so very alone. He finally met her gaze. His eyes were not cold, as she had feared, but full of an exhaustion so deep it was startling. It was the look of a man who had been fighting a war in silence. He reached across the table and covered her hand with his. It was the first time he had touched her in months, and the shock of it was like an electric current. I am sorry, he said, his voice a low rumble. He hesitated, as if searching for the right words. I am so sorry, Amelia. I have been consumed. By what? She asked. Your work. Is that all there is now? You are a millionaire many times over. What more do you need to prove? He did not answer. He squeezed her hand, a tight, almost painful grip. He picked his phone up, turned it over, and without so much as a glance at the screen, put it back in his pocket. He leaned forward, his voice barely a whisper. We should leave, he said. I want to talk to you, but not here. They drove home in a silence that was different from the usual one. It was not empty, but filled with a tense, expectant energy. They entered the silent mansion, and Liam led her into his study, the room she had been forbidden to enter for months. She had always respected his space, his inner sanctum of work, but now she felt an unbidden thrill of terror and anticipation. He closed the door. He did not turn on the lights, leaving the room illuminated only by the faint glow of the streetlights. Outside he took a deep breath, and the words tumbled out of him, a torrent of confession that broke a dam of silence. I need a baby, Amelia, he said, his voice raw with emotion. I need us to have a baby. Now I am ready now. The words hit her with the force of a physical blow. She staggered back, leaning against the cold mahogany bookshelf. The questions that had been building in her for months now coalesced into a single, incredulous gasp. You need a baby, she whispered, her voice shaking. You have been a ghost for 9 months, and now you demand a child. Are you insane? He did not protest. He just stood there, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. He looked at her, his eyes filled with a mixture of pain and desperation. The unspoken war, the story that unfolded in the dimly lit study, was not one of betrayal or a secret lover, but one of a war he had been fighting in silence. It began 9 months ago, almost to the day. Liam had been working on a revolutionary new technology for Thontech, a quantum computing breakthrough that would have cemented his legacy. But a rival company, led by a ruthless competitor from his past, had stolen his core intellectual property. It was a digital heist of unprecedented scale. Liam could not go to the police. He could not involve the authorities without destroying his company's reputation and sparking a panic in the markets. He had spent the last 9 months fighting a silent, desperate war to reclaim his stolen work and destroy his rival's company. From the inside out he had lived and breathed this battle. His company, his legacy, his entire fortune was on the line. He had been so consumed by the fight that he had lost himself in it. He could not look at Amelia, could not touch her, because he felt so unworthy. He was a liar, a man who was failing, and he could not let her see that. The lie was not about an affair, it was about his own profound fear of failure. Then came the other part, the reason for the physical distance. The stress, the sleepless nights, the constant anxiety had taken a toll on his body. He had been quietly visiting doctors. They had run tests, and the results had been frightening. He had been diagnosed with an anxiety-induced autoimmune disorder that affected his physical health and stamina. He was not a man who was sick. He was a man who was a shadow of his former self. The intimacy he had once cherished with his wife was something he felt he could not offer. He was afraid of his own weakness, of his body failing him in her arms. I was broken, Amelia, he said, his voice cracking. I felt I was not a man anymore. I could not be a husband to you, not the one you deserved. I needed to fix it. I needed to get our future back. And today he had done it. He had won the war. He had reclaimed his company's future. The legal maneuvers, the corporate espionage, the sleepless nights had paid off. The rival company was going to be absorbed by his own. He was not a millionaire. He was a multi-billionaire now. He had saved everything. I want to start our family now, he said, his voice full of a new, desperate hope. I have fixed everything. The doctors said with the stress gone, I will be better. I want to build a real family with you. I want to be a father. Amelia stood frozen, listening to his confession. The anger and hurt that had consumed her for months now gave way to a powerful wave of shock and a confusing surge of pity and understanding. He had not been having an affair. He had not been a heartless husband. He had been a man alone on a sinking ship, too proud and too afraid to ask for help. Why did you not tell me? She whispered. The question was not a challenge, but a raw ache. I would have been here for you, Liam. I would have helped. He finally looked at her, his eyes glistening. I could not. I could not face the failure. I could not let you see me like that. I am sorry. I am so sorry. The slow thaw the next few weeks were a difficult and painful process of rebuilding. The silence was broken, but it was replaced by an awkward, often tearful, conversation. They decided to see a therapist, a middle-aged woman named Dr. Evelyn Reed who specialized in couples counseling. In Dr. Reed's office, the secrets they had kept from each other began to unravel. Amelia confessed her suspicions of an affair, her feelings of being abandoned and worthless. Liam admitted his fear, his feelings of shame and inadequacy, and his belief that he had to be a hero on his own. He was so focused on protecting her from your failure, you failed to protect her from your silence. Dr. Reed said gently to Liam, love is not about protecting your partner from the storm, it is about weathering it together. The therapist helped them to reconnect in small, incremental ways. They started with simple things. They would eat dinner together without phones. They would talk about their days, not just their work. They went on long walks through the gardens of the mansion, their hands now intertwined. For the first time in months, they truly saw each other. Amelia saw the deep lines of exhaustion around Liam's eyes, the way his shoulders still carried the weight of his recent battle. Liam saw the sadness that had lingered in Amelia's gaze, the way she had tried to fill the void with her hobbies. One evening, after a particularly emotional therapy session, they sat in the living room, a fire crackling in the fireplace. Liam reached for her hand and pulled her onto the couch beside him. I do not want to rush this, Amelia, he said, his voice soft. I know I was wrong. I was so wrong. I will not demand anything of you again. We can take this as slow as you need. She leaned her head on his shoulder. It felt both foreign and completely natural. The warmth of his body was a comfort she had forgotten. Thank you, Liam, she said, her voice muffled against his suit. I need to trust you again. The intimacy they began to rebuild was not just physical, it was emotional, mental, and spiritual. They started to share their dreams again, their hopes for the future, and their fears. They talked about the kind of parents they would be. They laughed about their terrible first date, and cried about the pain of the last 9 months. One night, as they lay in bed, she felt his arm gently wrap around her waist. He did not ask for anything, but just held her close. She turned in his arms, her heart pounding. The first touch after so long was tentative, a question and a quiet answer. The physical connection came naturally, not as a demand, but as a tender, slow rediscovery. It was not a physical act alone, but an act of profound emotional healing. Weeks turned into months. Thorntech was thriving, and Liam, with the help of a new, brilliant team, was able to delegate more. He was no longer a ghost in his own home, but a husband, a partner, and a best friend. They started to live their life together, not just in the same house. The conversations about a baby were now a shared journey. They talked about names, schools, and what a family would mean to them. They went for checkups together, spoke with doctors, and prepared for a new chapter in their lives. The fear was gone, replaced by a quiet, hopeful anticipation. Amelia's paintings had changed. The wild, angry colors had been replaced by a soft, warm palette of blues, greens, and pinks. They were filled with light and warmth, depicting tranquil scenes of nature and a profound sense of peace. The canvas was no longer a riot of emotion, but a mirror of her new reality. One evening, as they were sitting in the garden, watching the sunset, Liam put his arm around her. Are you happy? He asked, a rare moment of vulnerability in his voice. She smiled, leaning her head on his shoulder. I am so happy, Liam. I feel as though we went to the bottom of the ocean and came back up together. We found a new way to breathe. He kissed her hair, a simple, loving gesture that was worth more than all the money in his vast empire. The silence between them now was not empty, but full of the quiet joy of two people who had found their way back to each other. It was a silence filled with trust, understanding, and the promise of a future they would build together, one day at a time. The mansion no longer felt like a mausoleum, but a home, and the most expensive thing in their lives was no longer the silence, but the love they had fought so hard to reclaim. The journey to a family was a shared one, built not on demands, but on a deep, abiding, and renewed love. A few months after the anniversary dinner, they found out they were expecting. The news did not come with the jubilant, confetti-filled celebration Amelia had once imagined. Instead, it was a quiet, shared moment of profound awe. They held each other in their bathroom, the pregnancy test a small, insignificant piece of Plastic in the grand scheme of their new lives. Liam's eyes, usually so serious and analytical, filled with tears. He did not say a word, just pulled her into a tight, trembling embrace. It was the purest form of love she had ever felt. Their life became a symphony of small, joyful preparations. The cold, stark rooms of the mansion slowly transformed. Liam, who had once been glued to his computer, was now poring over blueprints for the nursery. He insisted on using Amelia's architectural skills to design the space, and they spent weekends together, discussing everything from the shade of cream paint for the walls to the safest types of cribs. He would hold her hand while she picked out fabrics, his attention undivided and completely focused on her. One afternoon, as they were assembling a bookshelf, Amelia paused, a nail in her hand. "What if I am not a good mother?" she asked, her voice small. "What if I fail?" Liam stopped what he was doing and knelt in front of her. He took the nail from her hand and gently held her face in his. "Amelia, you are the most patient and loving person I know. You did not give up on a ghost of a man. You will be an incredible mother. We will learn together." His words, born from the vulnerability of their shared struggle, were more reassuring than any platitude. She felt her fears melt away, replaced by a deep sense of security. They visited doctors together. The appointments a new ritual of shared intimacy. Liam would hold her hand during every ultrasound, his face a mix of wonder and protectiveness as they saw the tiny flicker of life on the screen. He asked questions, listened intently, and took notes. His genius for analysis now applied to the well-being of their future child. One night, as they lay in bed, the moon casting a silver glow through the window, Liam wrapped his arms around her from behind, his hand resting on her stomach. "Thank you," he whispered into her hair. "Thank you for not walking away. I was so broken, Amelia. I do not think I would have survived without you." She turned in his arms, her heart full. "We did it together, Liam. We are a team." He kissed her then, and it was a kiss of healing, of promises, and of a future finally within their grasp. The love that had almost died had been reborn, stronger and more profound than before. It was a love that had been tested by silence and forged in the fire of shared vulnerability. The mansion, with its vast, empty spaces, now waited to be filled with the joyous chaos of a family, a true home for two people who had found their way back to each other. Their journey was a testament to the fact that even the most shattered relationships could be rebuilt, not by ignoring the cracks, but by filling them with the light of honesty, patience, and unwavering love. They were no longer two separate souls living in a large, cold house. They were a family, ready to face whatever came next, together. Amelia's due date came and went. The final weeks were a mix of anticipation and exhaustion. When the first contractions began, Liam was by her side, not as a calm, distant partner, but as a nervous, devoted husband. He held her hand so tightly she felt his own fear and hope. In the delivery room, all the wealth and power of his empire seemed to vanish. He was just a man, his face pale with worry, focused only on his wife and the life they were about to bring into the world. He spoke to her constantly, his voice a low, steady rumble of encouragement and love. The moment their daughter, Clara, was placed in Amelia's arms, the world outside the hospital room ceased to exist. Clara was a miracle in miniature. Bundle of perfection. Liam, the man who had demanded a baby, stood speechless, tears streaming down his face as he looked at her. He reached out a trembling finger, gently stroking her cheek. "She is perfect, Amelia," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. He held her for the first time, a look of utter awe on his face. The tiny, helpless infant, so fragile and trusting, seemed to undo all the tension that had ever existed within him. His large, powerful hands, which had built an empire, now cradled his daughter with a tenderness that was breathtaking. Returning to the mansion was a new beginning. The silence was broken, not by the hum of a computer, but by the soft coos and quiet cries of a newborn. The house was no longer a symbol of their distance, but a sanctuary filled with the new sounds of family. Liam, who had once been so consumed by his work, now found a new purpose. He woke up for the late-night feedings, changed diapers with a determined if clumsy efficiency, and rocked Clara to sleep in the nursery they had designed together. He found he had a new superpower, the ability to soothe his crying daughter. He would sing to her, his rich baritone voice filling the quiet halls with lullabies. The man who could not express his feelings a year ago now spoke a new language of fatherhood, one of soft whispers and gentle touches. One evening, Amelia walked into the nursery and found Liam asleep in the rocking chair, Clara nestled safely on his chest. The sight was so simple, so perfect, it brought tears to her eyes. She covered them both with a soft blanket and stood there for a long time, watching them. The man who had once been a ghost was now the most solid presence in her life. Their journey was not a fairy tale where all the problems disappeared in a single moment. There were still difficult conversations, and the scars of the past lingered, but they had faced the worst together and come out the other side. They had learned that a strong foundation was not about perfection, but about the willingness to be vulnerable and to trust each other through the storm. Their love had been reborn, not from the demands of a desperate man, but from the patient, enduring grace of a wife who had refused to give up. The family they had built was the true masterpiece, a life filled with love, laughter, and the soft, precious sounds of their daughter, Clara. 6 months after Clara's birth, their lives found a rhythm all their own. The Thorntech office still demanded a great deal of Liam's time, but he had become a master of setting boundaries. He left at a reasonable hour, and his phone stayed on the charger during dinner, a habit that was now a non-negotiable part of their day. Weekends were reserved for their little family. They would take Clara to the park, Liam pushing the stroller with a joyful, almost boyish, pride. He would crouch down and talk to her, his tone softer than Amelia had ever heard it, pointing out birds and leaves as if they were the most fascinating things in the world. Amelia had returned to her work as an architect, but her projects now felt different. They were infused with a new sense of purpose and light. She was designing a new wing for a children's hospital, a space meant to be filled with color and comfort, and she brought a fierce dedication to the work. The sterile, cold lines of her earlier designs had been replaced with soft curves and welcoming spaces. She knew with a certainty that had been missing for so long that her work mattered, just as her family did. They still saw Dr. Reed occasionally. Their sessions now focused less on healing old wounds and more on navigating the new challenges of parenthood. They laughed about the exhaustion, the endless stream of questions, and the way Clara seemed to know exactly when they were at their most tired. They were not perfect, but they were honest, and that was something they had never been before. One evening, after Clara had finally fallen asleep, they sat on the couch in the living room, a rare moment of quiet. Liam was not on his phone, but holding Amelia's hand, his thumbs stroking her knuckles. "I was thinking today," he said, his voice thoughtful. "When I was fighting that war, all I could think about was winning. I thought if I won, everything would be okay. I would be whole again." He paused, a small smile playing on his lips. "I was wrong. Winning the war did not make me whole. It was not the money or the company that fixed me. It was you. It was us. It was Clara. It was coming home to this." He gestured around the room, at the baby monitor glowing softly on the table, at the little stuffed animals tucked into the corner. The silence that now filled the mansion was not one of distance, but of profound contentment. It was a silence that spoke of love and peace, of two hearts beating in unison, no longer haunted by the past. It was a silence filled with the promise of a long, happy life, a family they had built together, one gentle moment at a time. The expensive silence had finally been filled with something priceless.